Okay. Okay, we're streaming live. Welcome, everybody out there, Merrick patrons near and far, friends of Merrick Libraries, Top Shelf Live. Thank you all for joining us. I am so thrilled to be here. This is episode 6. I still can't believe it's episode 6, but instead of calling it Top Shelf Live episode 6, we really need to call it episode 6, Around the World in 80 Days with Sarah Langan. Because this woman
sweet
is unstoppable. Her book came out in February. She has been on more things, and I'm calling it Around the World in 80 Days because I didn't really want to call it the
what
3-hour tour, because we know what happens on the minnow. We didn't want to put you on the minnow, so I couldn't call it the 3-hour tour. So we're going to go 80 days with Sarah Langan. I said it came out in February. I think it was February 2nd. But this author, our guest tonight, has been on more podcasts and in more interviews with libraries, I'm going to say, around the world. But she decided to spend episode 6 with all of us here. So luckily, WandaVision has finished, so we can all focus on this tonight because that's where the action is. And I will tell you that not only did Garden City's own Sarah Langan join us for episode 6, but she was on the 50th episode of the Top Shelf at Merrick Library podcast. And honestly, I cannot thank her enough for doing that. So Sarah Langan, thank you so much. Welcome to Top Shelf Live at the Merrick Library.
Well, Carol Ann, that's maybe the best introduction I've ever had. And you had props.
I did. People come for the props. They don't come for this. They come for you and the props. Everybody knows.
Well, yes. So thank you. I'm really glad to be here. And this is actually my last big event.
Whoa. So. Well, okay. So we'll make a little.
And I also was trying to think of who I would be on Gilligan's Island, and there's no good option. So I'm also glad.
There's really not.
There's no good character option that you're like, yeah, that one's okay.
I mean, maybe Marianne, like I sort of related to her with the pigtails. I don't know. But so we're here to talk about Sarah Langan's book, Good Neighbors, which I know it's very hard to see. So I apologize for the optics on that. But maybe I get closer. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the best thing about the way this book came to me. Simon & Schuster sends me galleys. Love Simon & Schuster. And they kind of got me in the sweet spot where I was looking for something next. So I'm kind of going through all my galleys and I'm looking at this cover and I'm saying, wow, so either the paint is dripping or the sky is falling, which turned out to be prescient because although it wasn't the sky that was falling, it was the earth that was falling into itself in the fashion of a sinkhole. And we'll get to that in a minute. So like I said, Sarah Langan's been around the world in 80 days. She's been interviewed by Marion Winnick from Newsday. She has sat down with Ryan Stradle, Paul Tremblay, Victor Lavelle, Grady Hendricks, Christopher Golden, and then somehow she decided, so while she's hanging out with all the seniors, she's decided today to come and hang out with the nerdy freshmen. So I appreciate that, Sarah.
Oh, come on.
I'm
so glad you have me. Gillian Flynn, you forgot.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about, now I'm just going to go.
No, people were texting me on Facebook or like being like, how did you get this interview? I was like, I don't know how to answer that question. It's kind of loaded, right?
It is a loaded question, but I think it's pretty awesome. If anyone sees me looking down at my phone, it's because I'm trying to find the comments in case anybody is commenting, which I don't know if they are. I can't quite see it right now. So bear with me because technology. So I hope that I get to everybody and your questions. If you do have questions, please throw them in to the chat and I will try to answer them for you. But we are here to talk about, I want to talk about the book, but I want to remind everybody, in case they don't know, that Sarah Langan is a 3-time Bram Stoker Award winner, which is,
I don't think I showed these. There's one.
What?
Right?
You have props?
Yeah, I have a prop. And this one is for The Missing, which is my second novel. It like you open the door and there's the name, and it's
I
like this little
can't.
and it's cool. It's really heavy. It's a weapon.
I was just going to say they've weaponized you with your words. That's unbelievable. So 3 times, and it's funny because I've only seen them in Google Images, right? So whenever I look up to see what it looks like, I kind of have this, 2-dimensional picture or one, but that's
It's substantial. Like I was really surprised. It was like, oh, thank you,
so
awesome.
I have a question. I noticed that you have your MFA from Columbia, but you also have an MS in environmental health science and toxicology from NYU. So you've got the MFA from Columbia, the other degree. Somebody is saying that is such a cool award. It is the best award.
It's really cool.
They've
come with me. This is my garage. They come with me wherever I go.
I'm sure there's an Emmy in your future somewhere, but in the meantime, you got to be showing all the Bram Stokers. So you go to, which comes first, the MFA or the environmental health science?
So I always wanted to be a writer, and I went to grad school. I went to college for it. I went to grad school for it. I graduated. I finished classes by the time I was, I think, 23, something like maybe even 20. So, but then there's a lot of time where I had to be a better writer and work on it and wasn't going to make a living on my writing. And so I was working in publishing, and I knew it was a dead end. I knew that I would never have enough time to write in publishing because for me, there are plenty of people who can do it, but I'm not the highest energy person on the planet. So I thought I will, I'm not.
I don't really, okay. I believe you.
So I wanted something that I could make more money at, and then I could work part-time at even maybe. So I got this master's in environmental toxicology, and I thought maybe I'll work for the government, not to knock on it, but you do get more holidays and you do get better pay. Like publishing is, when I graduated, the New Yorker wasn't even paying 20 grand.
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, it was like, okay, so you're really hiring, I don't know what that system was supposed to be hiring for, but it's unreasonable to expect people to work for that kind of money. So anyway, I did that. But as soon as I was enrolled in the program, my first novel sold. But the program happened happily. It's an NYU program that I really enjoyed, that pays you to go. So they paid me, and they paid for my MetroCard, and they paid my health insurance, and I had money. And then honestly, it was so much less work than a day job would have been.
Yeah.
I love school. School's kind of easy,
It is pretty great. Now, were you still living in Garden City when you were going into school, or were you living somewhere else?
Brooklyn. I left for Brooklyn. I came back to Garden City on and off. But I think I was in Cobble Hill then. And then I was commuting. I remember there was a train strike, a subway strike, when I had final exams in a wintertime. And they were like, students, just get there. And I rode my bike in the cold, across the Manhattan Bridge, because you can't ride across the Brooklyn Bridge. And I was so cold. And I was like, I'm old. I'm 30. And this is not for me. This is 18-year-olds can do this. And I complained. I was like, it's really cold to have to ride my bike to get.
Suddenly you're like, get off my lawn, you crazy kids.
And they were like,
oh my gosh. When we met, and I was thrilled to host you on Top Shelf, we talked a lot about the inspiration for Good Neighbors. And because when I picked it up and I started reading, it's very deceptive, right? Well, I shouldn't say it's deceptive, because you look at this cover and you can draw your own conclusions. And I'm thinking, wow, the sky is really falling on these people in these houses. You go behind the beautiful lawns and the gorgeous front doors and the nice cars in the driveway, And you do this deep dive on suburbia, which I love. Of course, everyone thinks Maple Street, the idea is when you move to the suburbs, life's going to be fabulous. Certainly the family in the book, the Wild family, which I think it's very interesting that you call them Wilds, they make the trek to the island looking for what they think is the land of milk and honey. So they move on to this gorgeous cul-de-sac, and they've achieved this status that they think they want so much, and things just go very, I guess wrong is the right word. But I love the way you bring in all these suburban families, because you never really know what's going on behind those doors on Maple Street. Tell us, what's the inspiration? How did you get to Maple Street? Give me everything.
I think there's a few things, but I think there's the one which is like, wherever you go, there you are. And there's this idea like, what the cover I think means to me is like, there's this perfect mask that you have to wear in the suburbs, no matter who you are. And I found it here in Los Angeles too. It's not exclusive to the suburbs. It's
Right.
Exclusive to homogenous communities where everyone knows you and there are expectations and there are rules on how to behave. And so you wear the mask, and that's socially appropriate. And as you get to know people, you remove it step by step. And if you're lucky, you can find people that there's no mask at all. And I think, so it's about the mask, but it's about the masks people intentionally wear just as politeness. And then it's about the masks that people don't even know they're wearing, that I think are wounds that we all have, that are normal and just a part of being human. We just have blind spots. And when people unwittingly trip on those blind spots, our reactions are disproportionate and can be interpreted as crazy. And there's not a person I can think of I've ever met who hasn't had a situation like that. And I think what I'm really talking about in this book is the way we've all been radicalized, not just, and in some way, somehow, these personal, regular human wounds have been exploited by our culture in ways that have made us more reactive, more likely to be violent, more judgmental, and less tolerant of people who are different. So it's a tinderbox. And I think our culture is at some funky kind of crossroads about this, that I blame social media somewhat. I blame the media, and I blame bad actors who have harnessed our legitimate fears and curdled us and turned us against each other.
For sure. I mean, you can just, to the point about social media, when you see everyone's going to the beach or they're going on vacation, even though, wherever we are in COVID times or before COVID times, you've got this fear of missing out. And it's sort of, to some, it tarnishes what you've got at home. You think they're living better lives than you are, but you don't really know what's going on in that house. Certainly, Gertie, one of the main characters in this book, really wants to have this connection with Rhea. Rhea just cannot get out of her own way. Yeah. I love the relationship between these two women. I love the way you draw each of these characters. Julia just steals my heart, that kid. She just, she steals my heart. And I'm sure we talked about that she's just got some great sentences, more props because of my the locations I want to go to in the book. So you're saying Good Neighbors comes out of this, everything that's going on in where we are in the world. When did you start writing Good Neighbors? How long ago?
Forever ago. So I started writing it, I think the year after Francis was born, maybe even before that. And that was 2011. So 2012, long time ago. And then I realized I couldn't figure it out because I had a monster in it and there was a monster in the sinkhole. Spoiler, there's no monster in the sinkhole. So it's just
But
people.
remember, we talked about this because I had said to you, you're so used to, I shouldn't say you're used to, where you normally write from is this horror place. So we talked about how you were trying to put a monster in the book. And that's what you were just saying there. You were trying to do this. And
It competed too much with the human story. And even that was even before I realized what the real conflict was, which was this conflict between Rhea and Gertie, and to some extent Arlo. So I wrote another book. It took 5 years, horror, straight horror, and then it got rejected everywhere. And and I was like, well, I'll go back to this other one. And then I realized it wasn't horror, that it was really this human story. And as soon as that happened, I wrote it pretty quickly. That would have been after 2016. And I have been in some ways, in the public since, I don't know, 2006 or something, when my first book was out. And so I've had a lot of experiences with social media, and many of them have been bad. And many of them have been, there's a weird, I'm like the lowest, low brow celebrity you could find, but also the most attainable. It's easy to get to me. And so I was thinking about that. And I was thinking about the ways, like, if I were a guy, would these things have happened to me? Maybe, but maybe not. And would I have been shot down or corrected as constantly? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
So it was me kind of dealing with that. And also in the era of Trump, like, what does this mean about our country? And what does this mean about where we're going? And why is this happening? Why are we fighting like this? History, I've been reading a little bit about, in history, just reading like Dolly Madison's biography to the kids. And like John Adams refused to go to Jefferson's inauguration. Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't.
So they're actually, it's not unprecedented. It is precedented by John Adams, who I kind of like. So, and then like Aaron Burr didn't just like fade away. He tried to start a revolution and a civil war and wanted to be the president of the Western territories. And he was tried and exonerated. There is a precedent, and it didn't fall apart,
And we're certainly at that point now. I just wanted to go back to something you said about deciding not to put the monster in the book. So you're trying to put Godzilla into the book, and then you realize that's not going to work. That must have been a very liberating moment as a writer, because you're like, oh gosh, now I don't have to worry about trying to put this square peg in the quote unquote round hole, the sinkhole.
It was terrifying. Like, I was like, how do I write this book and not be boring? Like,
well, it's not boring.
No, it's not. I learned, but I had to study. I like read Megan Abbott, and I read Stephen King, and I read Gillian Flynn, and I read all of these page turner thrillers that were more the ones that were the psychological thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how are they doing it? And then I was like, there's actually a format. I didn't realize, like, I know the horror format, but there's actually a format for a lot of things. So that was fun. And realizing that you can plant these psychological traps and have your characters behaving in ways that the reader knows why they're behaving that way, but they don't know. And that's like so fun. So
not only is it fun for the writer, but for the reader, we're having a ball with that, because we know that once Rhea doesn't invite Gertie, and we're just, once we know that there's this tension, we know kind of, oh boy, she's going to get it in some way. There's going to be a powwow. There's going to be something. And that narrative builds when you add in Good Neighbors, sort of almost, I think it's at the front of almost every chapter, there's sort of a news article or some kind of news piece that's written in the future that is recollecting the events that we're reading about, but we haven't gotten to the place where they are yet.
Yeah. I think I
Amazing. I love that you did that.
I think that I was trying to figure out the best way to build tension. And I also remembered in reading Carrie where he gives away the end halfway through the book. And you're like, you're just hoping the reporter's wrong because it's so upsetting. And you're like, no, I'm going to keep reading even faster. And it's counterintuitive that that would happen. The intuition is don't give away the ending because then people get bored. And it's like, no, if they really care, they're going to want to just barrel through even more. So that was, I was hoping that would happen.
And when you set us up that way, thank you for setting us up that way, by the way, you leave enough where they're talking about events that we don't know what happened yet. So we don't know. We're like, well, how did that? So now I'm reading about the character, and then we go 25 years later or 20 years later, and maybe it's not even that far, 10 years later, something. And you're like, wait a minute, how do we go from this page to this news article in the Hofstra News or something, whatever it was called, which I love that you sprinkle, it's like little pieces of Long Island sugar all over this book. So you build that, and you must have been having a little laugh every time you did that. Because you're like, oh yeah, they don't know what's coming.
It was joy. Like
Yeah.
it was joy. It was really fun. Like, so I wrote the story, and the story, was hard to write, and that was the base. But then I had placeholders for what the articles would be. But then as I went back in, I was like, oh, I'm going to have like kind of a villain telling the story that's going to drive people crazy because he'll say things that aren't quite right. And then I'll have a true story in there too. That was fun.
When I got to the end, I actually went back to look at the news articles because I wanted to see, well, some of the articles, are they opinion pieces? Are they factual pieces? Are they scientific, quote unquote, studies? So I wanted to remember which voice was saying what. So I kind of went back and I just looked at all of those. And then I was like, man, what did she do? And then I'm like, how can I get her on the podcast? How can I? I have too many questions and I need to know all these things. Also, a warning to the readers is you do this. I don't know if because I have a glare.
The map, you can see it.
I think this map, because when the reader opens this page, we're like, what on earth is she going to do to us with this? What does this map mean? What is happening? And then throughout the book, the map evolves to incorporate the growth of the sinkhole. And sinkholes terrify me. So I'm scared. I love watching horror movies. I love reading horror books. I think the most recently, Grady Hendrix's most recent person, vampire, scared the heck out of me. He's still in my head, that character. But the sinkhole thing just freaks me out. Freaks me out. Tell me why you chose sinkholes.
I had given this book to a friend, like a fellow writer, and he was like, asteroid, which was what it first was. He was
I
like,
didn't know that.
You should do a sinkhole. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. And then as I was writing, I thought more and more that it's also the effects of global warming are part of this story. So it was a total evolution. But I don't know if I already told you this, upon writing it, a sinkhole formed at the bottom of my block.
I can't believe it.
They filled it with cement, and that ruined the underground river up here. So they had to come back and rip it all out. And they closed the road. And I live on a cul-de-sac. So they closed our road for 4 months. And then we could get through at lunchtime. And it was just closed from 9 to 5 for 4 months because there was so much work to do.
So were you manifesting this?
I think, they're happening all over.
Yes.
And it's like, it's bizarre. And I think what's so scary about it is it's something we can't control, something in some way that represents what we've done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Anthropocene. And it's also something that shows us that the things that we relied on how our world works are falling apart. So it's like, okay,
Yeah, and I want to say within the last 2 years, I don't know if it was last summer or the summer before, and it could have been last summer, which seems like 10 years ago, honestly. There was just article after article, and it would be on the news, or I would read it in the newspaper. It would come up in my feed somewhere that Florida just had another sinkhole. And then there was another one. I'm like, wait, is that the same one? No, it was in a different location. Okay, well, and then there was a third one, and that was over by Jacksonville. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And I remember saying to my very genius husband, do we have to worry about sinkholes? Like, because now I'm worried about COVID. I'm worried about all the hurricanes that hit us, and I'm worrying about landslides in California. It's just, where to blame, like you said. And he was like, "Oh, I don't really know. Sinkhole can open up anywhere." So yeah, go to sleep with that at night. That's just terrific. And then Sarah Langan pops up in my mailbox, in my book mailbox. Thank you very much. And I think you just posted one recently that there was a sinkhole, but I don't remember where that was.
I forget where it was, but there's so many of them. It's like, okay. And then what's crazy is the footage. You'll see like a car stop and then maybe just try and pull around it. And you're like, don't pull around the sinkhole. Just get out of your car.
Just back up. Or yeah, get out, run.
Go.
You know how much it weighs?
This isn't going to end well.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it is kind of scary. And the sinkhole in this book is I had a lot of fun with, because it also isn't quite, it's got nighttime logic, a friend pointed out to me, which is like in the daytime you're like it's a sinkhole, and then at nighttime you're like, is it a sinkhole? What is it? And what's down there?
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's great. That is exactly right. Wow. What a good way to think of that, right? Because during the day when the lights are on and hopefully you have your lights and the hurricane's coming, it's not so dastardly. But then when you go to sleep and you're hearing the wind and your fear just compounds the fear. Also, the interesting thing about putting the sinkhole where it is that not only is it not safe in the park, but it's not safe in the houses either, because there's two places, really no place safe on Maple Street. I mean, maybe the sidewalk, the slip and slide maybe are the only places that are safe. Right? That's the only, like, everyone's good on the slip and slide.
Doesn't Rhea say in the dating and like they discontinued those because they're toxic? Like
she does. She is great. I honestly, I'm not putting a jinx on anything, but I was wondering who the heck would play her in a movie. Like if they cast this, who the heck? And I went through a list of things because she has these she's that neighbor, even though she doesn't think she's that neighbor. Her character development is so, you feel for her. I felt for her because I don't know if she doesn't know what's happening to her. She doesn't understand who she is. She doesn't understand her personality. She doesn't know what her flaws and faults are. So half the time you do want to choke her, but the other half you're just like, man, she doesn't know what
no
she
idea.
is.
I think of her as like a really scary British person. You know how like you'll be talking to them and they'll just say something like so smart but so mean, and you're like, I'm friends with you, but I can never be too close because I'm frightened. Like,
like you scare me.
Well, it is that. It's like she's amazing, but she's like, what we love in leaders isn't necessarily what makes a good leader. Right. These like, great line, like so funny. And I think when you look, this isn't necessarily true of Rhea, but maybe a little bit. But when you look at the people that they make fun of the most, there's usually a pattern that's unsettling. It's always low hanging fruit. It's not, somebody who actually deserves their scorn.
And these poor wilds come, romping into this situation. And Rhea is, it goes well at first. And then that switch gets flipped and Rhea's narcissism just comes, it starts encroaching.
I think it frightens her. I think she doesn't know what it is. I think she's just like, I'm not sure she's even sure it's really happening. Like, I think she's, you know, in the way like a kid thinks to themselves, like, oh, I punched my friend at school today, but no, I didn't. You know, like it never happened. And like, no one's going to call my mom, except I'm going to take the phone off the hook. Like, just, you know, because I don't like phones today, you know.
How easy or hard was it, or challenging, I guess maybe is the right word, to write Rhea? Because I feel like Gertie, she's very complex, but the reader understands, sympathizes, empathizes with her. But Rhea is really, I mean, if you talk about not putting a monster in the book, but she's the monster in the book.
Um, so some parts of it I felt like icky about as I was writing it, but I loved studying what she is and how narcissism works, and that made it easier. It gave me the excuse to do, you know, because I felt kind of bad sometimes writing the things that she was doing and the thoughts that she was having. But once I kind of allowed myself to do that, because this was the character and this was what was happening in the story, and this is how narcissists behave, then, you know, I could free myself up a little bit. But what I do is whenever I sit down to write, I just pretend no one's ever going to see this. So and sometimes it's true.
In that, right? There's what did we say earlier? The heartbreak of Sarah Langan before off camera. We were talking about that. I think you've got a nice compendium.
Just crying and holding old manuscripts.
your headshot with like Photoshop tears.
Running mascara.
Exactly. I could see it, and I think it would sell. So no one's prepared for the ending, no one's prepared for the middle, and no one is prepared for the book itself. As you've been doing these virtual tours and meeting with readers, what's been the most surprising thing, or has there been something that surprised you? What are people saying about Rhea particularly, or Gertie, or even that, you know, Julia, Larry, etc.?
What so I haven't, because they're virtual events, it's always like this, and I don't really talk to readers so much.
Yeah, I'm looking to see. I have a lot of people saying hello.
It's okay.
No questions yet.
But so I've gotten a few people. So a lot of the initial reaction was like, everyone I grew up with or who's ever known me is like, great, but I can't read it because it's going to be too scary. And I was like, it's not a horror novel. Just read it.
But they don't trust you.
Happens. And they're like, I don't think I can. And I still had some being like, I'm not going to do it. And I was like, why are you doing this to me? Like, you know me. How many people do you know who are writers? Just buy the book, read it. And then they did. And they were all like, oh my God, I loved it. And I didn't know, you know, I wasn't sure. But what that told me is a couple of things, which is like the label horror is so repellent to some people that it just closes off a ton of readers.
But viewers
so
too, for those who watch horrors, right? Yeah.
And then the other thing is a lot of women told me they cried. You know, they just like they felt validated because they have these emotions that Rhea has had. And it just made them like, I've never been allowed to say this. Women aren't allowed to express these feelings, but you did it. And I felt okay. And that was really nice. But what I didn't, I had intended this, but I wasn't hearing about it until more recently, is that men have been reading it and saying like, Arlo, you know, what happens to him is my worst nightmare. And I completely sympathize with him. And I had one reaction, which I loved, where a reader who reviewed it, and he said, you know, as a victim himself, the problem with being a victim is you can't tell anyone if you're a man, because people will think that now you're a victimizer. Like, because you come from this difficult past, that there's a monster inside you, and it's terrifying. So like, he had just utter sympathy for Arlo. And that was nice.
Yeah, I mean, when you make that connection with the readers in that way, it's certainly something you don't I wouldn't have expected that response. I would have been surprised. It's certainly surprising to hear it. And it's nice to be able to get that validation. You wrote this essay in LitHub or for LitHub about mothers as an archetype. And I thought that was such a great piece because it really validates motherhood. Certainly this book does, because you could be part Gertie and you could be part Rhea. You can be a combination of the both of them. And it seems so normal and relatable.
Well, what they have in common is they're doing their best, the both of them, and they're working in isolation. Yeah. Like, who are you supposed to go to when you need help as a mother? It's tricky.
Yeah, because you don't know, you want to confide in your friend, and but you also want to keep that pristine image, and you want people to think everything's good, we're good, everything's fine, just close the door, we're good. Outside, the lawn is tended to beautifully, cars are washed or not, or but everything looks great from the outside. But the minute you walk in the door, you don't know what goes on. And I find those type of suburban, I don't want to call them exposés, but that's sort of under the covers kind of thing about suburbia very, very interesting, because it's not what you think it is.
Yeah. I mean, this is not aspirational. And I think a lot of books about this are sort of like, look at these beautiful lives they have, but actually, they're not so beautiful. Like, that wasn't what I set out to write about. I'm not making fun of anything. This isn't a satire. It keeps being described as a satire. I don't understand how it's a satire.
No, I don't see that.
Yeah, like it's.
I mean, they have real problems. These people have real problems,
and I'm never at any point saying like, look how great this is, or look underneath. It's like, this is just us. This is how people are. This is, there's nothing inherently bad about anyone. There's nothing inherently good. Well, maybe I think people are inherently good, but just because it's in a suburb on a cul-de-sac doesn't mean it wouldn't happen in an apartment building. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean it wouldn't happen in Laurel Canyon, which is where I live. Doesn't mean it wouldn't happen anywhere. So yeah. Like,
but certainly when the Wilds move in, they think, like I said, this is the land of milk and honey for them. So most people think when they move out of the city and they move to the suburbs, it's going to be this bucolic existence. And then anybody who's here says, well, we got our own set of problems out here. So make sure you save your CVS coupons. You're going to need some hair color. It's that kind of
Yeah. There's rules here, and we're not going to explain them to you, but you better figure them out. And do not talk loud on your cell phone at preschool pickup. I'm telling you. So yeah. But I think for them, it is milk and honey. That's, they're like, we have stairs.
Yep.
We've never been in someone's home before. Like, they've never even, like, in my mind, their backstory is like, they don't even know how houses work. Like, they just are so inexperienced with this. Like a plumber, what do we do?
I do think about Arla with like anything that needs to be fixed that you have to call a guy for, a handyman, or I need a plumber, or somebody's got to look at the boiler. I mean, I'm from Brooklyn. I had no idea any of this stuff. So thankfully my husband does, because I have no idea.
It's a lot of YouTube.
Yes, well, there's that too. Yes, exactly. Nobody wants me MacGyvering anything though.
My husband MacGyvers everything. And like 90% of the time it's great. And like 10% of the time I'm like, did you take a foundational beam out of the house and make a bookshelf out of it?
Oh. And then you hear the Carrie house starting to creak and implode, right? And you're like, oh, that's how Stephen King did that. He took the foundational thing.
He made a bookshelf.
Liv Constantine called the book. She wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, and I love reading all of the author reviews, because some of them are really funny and some of them are like, oh, I thought the same thing. She calls Good Neighbors a modern day crucible. Beneath the surface of a suburban utopia, madness lurks. That's a great quote.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, I was thinking about the Crucible, and I wasn't going to lead the witness, but I was so hoping someone would say that. So I was I was
Go
really happy
live.
about that.
Oh
You
my
know,
gosh.
but
So
it's
yeah,
what happens on this block is like I studied mom mentality. I really got into it on how these things work and what is the bystander effect, and these things do come into play in the novel. But it was important to me that each person had distinct reasons for doing the things that they do that are rational and make sense, and that there's a feeling of abandonment on this block because the people with the means and the wherewithal leave as soon as that
yes.
sinkhole opens. They're like, which is what I would do, and there's an argument that those people are just as guilty. Am I my neighbor's keeper? Well, maybe. Like, who is then? Who is going to protect these people? Every year the fires come to LA and we leave. We're like, because it's really bad for your health to stay.
Right.
But who can afford to do that? And I think
Repeatedly too. It's not like you can just, just pack up not everybody can do that. Pack up and go. And where are you going?
it's for up to a month sometimes.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It's no joke. So I mean, this is going to happen more and more.
Yeah.
And I think the people who get left behind aren't acting rationally for good reason. And so I have compassion, and this isn't, I in the Crucible, it's ugly and nasty in ways that I don't think mobs really are all the time. In the news, we've seen some other
variations of other scenarios, right?
I was watching the Capitol and I was like, they're worse than what.
We all have a mean, but that's taking it to the next level. I'm looking at some of the comments here. Anne Moretto says she cannot wait to read the book. You have me hooked. Samantha Hall is watching. Jennifer DeMonda is watching. Michelle Craddock. Bev Schneider. Hi, Bev. Jeffrey Maynard. Hello. Miera Broderick, Kat Maynard. Look at all you guys. This is amazing. I am so glad that you came out here tonight. I see that we're running just where we want to be. Before I let you go, this book is out everywhere. Let's see if I can get it right. I can't. The glare. It'll happen, folks. There it is. Kind of fades in. Isn't that kind of magic?
It does.
This book is out everywhere in Nassau County. I can't speak for Suffolk because I only get the stats for Nassau, but it's nowhere. It's in hands all across the county.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
It is great. And I think it's wonderful. I love that you sprinkled the book. It's supposed to take place in Garden City, which I neglected to mention. A Garden City, fictionalized Garden City. There. Oh, I mentioned earlier that there's Croxley's is mentioned, and I love the kids are wearing Islanders jerseys. That's just terrific. And my son's got some upstairs, so that's like the whole thing. I love that hockey is the thing on Long Island. So guys,
I have my jerseys.
You do?
Yeah.
Do you have names on the back?
No, I don't. My husband got me when we got married. He made up our own hockey. He was like, I don't get sports at all, but he made up like our own family hockey team, the two of us, and made me this jersey. It was really sweet.
You have to post that somewhere. I mean, we all want to see that. People on Long Island are very, everywhere.
No,
really,
we've been to games and he's like, this is terrifying.
Oh my God, it's like my favorite
beating
sport.
each other up. And I'm like, yeah, it's great.
It's great. Eats the popcorn, takes the drink, eats the popcorn.
Very cathartic. Yes. I'm having so much beer.
Probably the only place you're really allowed to freewheelingly curse as much as you want. My father took me and my sister to our first hockey games, and we learned all our curse words in the blue seats at Madison Square Garden. And we would come home, and my mother would be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to my kids? So yes, so we got that hockey bug at an early age. Luckily, I married a hockey guy, even though we root for different teams, and I am
I'm
sleeping.
guessing.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sleeping with the enemy for 33 years. We go to different corners of the house to watch the game.
Do you really?
Yeah, because otherwise I'm very loyal to my team. So,
Well, they're performing better than the Islanders have in 30 years. So
well, I think but I know all the players on the Islanders just as much, so I root for them as long as they're not playing my team. So we keep it a peaceable kingdom as much as we can. Before I let you go, I would love to share with readers books that you're reading. And I ask a lot of the authors who come on, because I am such a horror person and I love reading horror books, favorite horror books or horror books that you've read recently, or anything you want to share along those lines.
yes. So I'm about to read the Lydia Millett Children's Bible because I just want to know. Like,
I
it's
just want to
done
know
so
too.
much good. Yeah. And then Walter Tevis' Mockingbird is just an all-time favorite of mine. I think he's like this genius who wrote in all different genres, and he should be the most famous sci-fi writer, everything writer, literary. Dan Chun, Ill Will, I think is a great one.
Oh my
Right?
gosh, that
You
book.
like that one?
Yes.
Let's see, Station 11. Anything by Karen Russell or Lauren Groff. Winter's Bone.
Oh my gosh, that is one of my.
It's perfect, right?
It is a perfect book. It is so, what a tight narrative. I mean, talk about, oh, there it is. That's the book.
This, I cried. I wasn't scared. I think maybe I don't get scared, but
You know
cried.
what? I feel like He Who Shall Not Be Named really, he was, what a character. If I ever was able to interview Grady, I would be like, yikes, man.
When the men ganged up, that was what I got upset about.
Yeah. Oh, what is that?
This one is, I'm in it, so that's why
Datlow? Is that Datlow? Yeah.
And
you're in that one.
So I recently, like within the last 4 years, read Peyton Place, and I think it's really underrated. It's very beautiful, and it's about a female friendship, which people don't realize, and it's about abuse, and it's about a small town, and it kind of, I never saw the TV show, but it's considered like a soap opera. It's not a soap opera at all.
Well, for its time, right? Everybody was just bowled over by it.
Yeah. I mean, but she couldn't have time to write, so she would lock her kids out of the house and in the bathtub, and she made this wood board that she would write in the bathtub, or I guess at least lock them out of the bathroom. And then, she died of alcoholism.
Yeah.
I mean, that it's like, this is a worthy book. It's not, I think when I was a kid, it was described to me as shallow, or sort of, I never read the one, I can't remember the name, like the ones that are like the pill popper 1960s.
Yeah.
Valley of the Dolls. I don't know if that's also actually good, but, and then I think this is anything Shirley Jackson, but this biography is really good.
She's great. Biography was great. And we need more Shirley Jackson in our lives. Right? We need those stories. So I'm here for whatever stories, you want to put in a book somewhere. I know you're in that Best of Horror, aren't you, in that one?
Yeah. And I have a novella out from Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, which is published by Small Beer Press. It's Gavin Grant and Kelly Link run that in Massachusetts.
Oh gosh, okay.
And Locust just called it Showstopping.
Why?
And it's like,
goodness.
Clutch my pearls.
Listen, my goodness, that's great. We also didn't get to mention, we're running late, but we didn't get to mention that the name of the park in the book is Sterling Park. And, that's, if you want that information or you want that story, you will have to go to the podcast to listen to episode 50, because
it's a serious flub. It's if you have any interest on just like the silliest mistake I could have made, that's a good one.
It is. I remember hearing that, and I remember the piece of me laughing and you laughing goes on. Like there's this long piece. And I thought, so I have the unedited, and then I always keep I keep both versions in case, God forbid, something happens and I need to go back to the it's a long piece of you and I are roaring with laughter. And I remember going upstairs, my husband's like, what was going on down there? He's like, I just heard you hysterical laughing. Like, I don't even know where to start.
Well, I mean, it's like, it's so embarrassing. And I'd only recently realized it, you know? It's like, and you were like, do you want me to cut that? So
Yes,
people
I did.
know? I was like,
that's what I love so much. I'm like, you sure I don't have to leave that in? You're like, oh, good.
I mean, I think it's apparent. Like, it's like, why did you do that, Sarah Langan? And it's
And
like,
of course, I told you what I thought it meant. I thought sterling silver. Like I had a whole
right.
different scenario, and you're like, let's go with that.
Well, it's like I've been asked, like, why is it near future? And it's like the kind of like some of the reason is it's like more global warming, but like truthfully, it was just like it takes me so long to get a book published that I might as well set it in 2027
because by that time it'll be legitimate.
Like, you know,
I did not know that was why. That's awesome.
It's like,
that is great. Oh my
it's not a good reason.
It's not, but it's pretty darn funny. I will say that. Okay, I am going to let you go. I just want to thank everybody, all the Merrick Library patrons. It's nice to see a lot of you coming into the building. You're all wearing masks. I hope that you are staying safe and that you are staying healthy. I feel like we're almost there to the point where we can resume our normal lives. But I do appreciate your patience with all of the things that we have to go through to keep us and you guys safe. We love seeing you when you come in. Thank you for coming to all the book discussions. Thank you for doing all of the programs that we are offering virtually and in person, such as they are. But it's amazing. You guys are the best. So I do want to thank you for all of your support. Thank you for joining us for episode 6, or as I get my prop, as I call it, episode 6, Around the World in 80 Days with author Sarah Langan. So remember to pick up Good Neighbors, get on the waiting list, go to your local bookstore. It is not to be missed. And thank you for bringing us along for 6 episodes. I love that all you guys watch. And I'm wishing you all a good night. And Sarah Langan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And honestly, like I'm so dim-witted. I realized like, I started with you and I'm ending with you. And it is Around the World in 80 days. So, and it's perfect. And you're such a wonderful interviewer. And you get me to say things that I haven't thought about in new ways. And I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's amazing. Everyone is saying thank you. You're a rock star. Now go get some sleep, get some rest. Don't lock your kids out of the bathroom while you write your next book, please. Okay. So I'm going to sign off to everybody here who's watching. Now watch. Let's see if I can actually do it. Stop the live stream. That's what I'd like to do. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you had as much fun as apparently we did. We'll see you soon.